episode of Get On Code, we'll learn about Unity basics for character model movements. As a game developer, movement is an important aspect that must be mastered. I can't stress that enough. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin, we're going to need a plane because we're going to need something for a character to walk on. So for purposes of this demonstration, we already have our plane activated right there. To see what size the plane is, we're just going to shrink it a little bit, make it 5 by 5 on the Z and the X axis. Kind of zoom out a little bit, and there's our plane. But obviously we want to have a little more room for our character to walk around. So let's go ahead and make it both, again, 15 on the X axis and 20 on the Z axis. It's about 1 inch going vertical in the Y axis. So there you have our plane. We're gonna need to create our plane for movement, right? So after that, we're going to actually need our character. For this, I chose a Spinosaurus from a project that I worked on recently. This is not for profit, by the way, so I can use this. And we're going to activate it as well. You're welcome to use whatever character model you want, because it's actually, the way I'm teaching this movement, you will be able to apply this to any character model. Okay, so now that we have our plane and our spinal character, Spinosaurus, we want to scale it right. For this, I just gave it 1, 1, 1 in an XYZ axis. That way it's on the ground. It's closest to the ground that it can be, and that gives it some gravity as well. For our spinal, we have to add a few options before we move forward. We have to add an animator, and the animator will do as it says. We'll animate the physics. We'll add, of course, a rigid body for collision, a capsule collider, a character controller, a mover script, which is actually a core script. Then we'll have our spinal controller that we will actually create. And let's open that up. Character model comes with a few different different color boxes where we have character animation. Since we want our character to actually move, the default state is our spinal idle state, and that starts directly after the scene enters. However, we want our guy to move, right? So to get him to move, we go to one of the animations. Walk forward. As you can see, there's a bunch of different walking animations that we can implement, or attack, death, swim, a bunch of movement operations, I could say, animations. Okay, so we just want our guy to walk. Okay, so now that we have our motion set to walking, we want to set the speed. I got it set to about 0.7. And we want to make our transition. So first we make our transition from the idle state, and then we make our transition from our walking state to our idle state, because we wanted to start the animation when we hit our input, and then we wanted to stop when we release it. So by default, if you click the animations, there aren't any conditions. We're gonna need to set our conditions in order for our guy to walk, right? So you just click the plus sign. We have a condition variable set, and we want to set it as equal to 0 when walk forward is not being pressed, and we want to set it when condition equals 1 when it is being pressed. So that way it knows, Unity knows that once we press our input, it's going to go, he's going to start walking forward, and once we release it, it's going to go back to idle. And let's just see how that runs. Okay, there's our guy right there. And he's walking when we're not pressing it. But as you can see, when we press, there's a little bit of a delay for the animation to stop. So how we fix that is we go back to our animator, uncheck has exit time on both of those, so that way it just completely exits once we release. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's try it out. Okay, perfect. We are perfect. Okay, so he moves around pretty good, and I'm gonna show you guys how to manipulate the camera and get him to walk as well, but that's almost like the finished product. So we move on to the next portion, which is actually the code. Oh yeah, and another thing, you have to map your input output variables. Should be in project settings. Project settings, there we go. Okay. Now we go to our input manager, and we can actually set that on the input for negative, down, up, alternative, S, W to go forward, S to go in reverse. Our gravity is going to be set to 3, so it pushes them down a little bit and helps it move a lot more realistic. Our animator down. Next, we have to add our rigid body in the options. Rigid body is there for collision detection. So you can kind of go by the settings I have here. A couple of important things. I gave it a mass of 1, 0 drag, angular drag. I do want it to use gravity, and it is kinetic. I believe, well, collision detection needs to be discrete. That means it needs to be completely independent. Okay, and also you don't want it to keep rotating, so you set to the freeze rotation in the X, Y, and Z axis, because if you don't, it's going to keep rotating off the character and it's going to look crazy. Okay, so after that, you just add the Capsule Collider. I got it 0.25 in the Y axis. For where it actually detects the collider. Radius is 0.5, as you can see right here. It's pretty close to the character, and the height is 1.5. I can probably bring it down a bit, but I think 1.5 is better. You can see as it zooms in right here. 1, and when it's 0.5. Okay, so we want to just off the ground in between the character in the y-axis and the ground. Finally, we add the character controller. That controls the slope limit. As you can see, we got it set to 45. The step offset's 0.3. These are just generic settings. You can actually, whichever works best for your character that you're trying to get to move, whatever works best. Again, we have it set in the y-axis to 1.5 again, and the radius is 0.5. We can keep it at 0.7. 0.5 is good, and the height is going to be 3, so it's going to be pretty close. Okay, so now that we got our rigid body, our capsule collider, and our character controller, we need to start moving on to the actual scripting code. Importing our core script that's built within Unity. Basically, you just go to scripts and go to mover script and it will pop up. Now, we just have a few options set for this. The limit, or the slope limit 30, the step height, you can control the step height of the actual character. We have to set to 0.25. We don't want it to be too big. The height is 2. Again, you can go through and use your own settings, but for this one, these settings are gonna be optimal. And you're going to make sure you set your sensor array rows to 1 and your sensor array count to 6. That's in every direction. We're all six directions for going forward and going backwards, etc., etc. However, next that we have now that we have our mover script settings set, now we actually need to create a script. Now, for this demonstration purposes, I already have it created, and it's called Spinal Controller Script. Okay, now we have it created. We're gonna go in and fill in the code for our script. By default, we're using our Unity engine, obviously. Okay, so we want to set our parameters for our character movement. So first, let's get the speed, right? So it's going to be a float. We're gonna call it speed. I'm gonna set it equal to 4. I think that's a good speed. We also want to set our rotation speed. Rotation speed, okay, because we don't want it to spin too fast. I got it set for 80, and then we'll also set our rotation, let's say rotation distance. How about that? And we're gonna set that for 0. It's gonna be a float variable. And finally, we can actually customize our gravity, which helps a lot. So you don't have to rely on Unity's gravity inputs, right? So we have that. Now we need to create our vector 3. There you go. Move direction equals vector 3 0. That is in the vector 3 okay. For anyone who doesn't know what vector 3 is, it just means that the vectors in the X, Y, and Z axis and where we're moving in those directions. So we want to add a character controller as well. We're gonna call that just controller. Yeah. And now our animator as well, which animator, there you are. And then we're just gonna call that animate. Now, of course, we need our start. We're always gonna have a start method in any Unity project. So controller, we want to get a new component, and that is going to be our character controller, and a new animate variable. And we are going to get our animator as well. Yeah, so now we have our character controller and we have our animator. So now we want to have our update, because this is going to update our scene at every frame. So we want to create an update. No, we do not want it to be private. Did I say I wanted it to be private? Okay, so first we want to account for input. So we're going to create an input dot get key, and then this is actually our key code that we're entering, and we want to set that to being W. Next we need to animate and set our integer to the condition that we stated earlier, the variable condition, to 1. Okay. And we want to set our move direction. Going to create a new vector 3, and our positions will be 0, 0, and 1 in the z-axis. What that means is we will not move in the x-axis, we will not move in the y-axis, we will only move in the z-axis, and that will be 1. Okay. Next, we want to set our speed to times equals speed, which means that it will be our move direction times speed and the result. Next, we want to transform our move so the guy knows what to do. So we're going to transform, then we're going to transform in the direction, and then the direction will be in the variable, of course, move direction. Finally, we want to set another if statement, and this if statement is different because we are actually setting when the key is released, or they call it get key up, which means when when the key is released. All right, and key code dot W. So when W is released, our guys are going to stop moving. Okay. So very similar. We set our integer, and then our transition condition, which we name condition, is going to be set to 1. I'm sorry, 0. And of course, we will create another move direction, vector 3 for the distance, or for the axis, it will be 0, 0, 0. That means that we are moving 0 in the x, 0 in the y, and 0 in the z. By default, Unity sets these variables when you have a vector 3 to x, y, z, so it makes it easy to remember. Okay. So now that we have our input, we need to set our rotation on the axis. So we have it set at rotate. What is it? Rotate distance is going to equal to plus equal input dot get access. This is in a horizontal axis. Gonna multiply that times the rotation speed because it needs to move. The rotation needs to move in conjunction with the character. Then we're gonna go time dot delta, which is going to capture our frame rate time. Oops. Okay. And then finally, we're gonna add our Euler angles. All right, so first we need to transform it for our Euler angles. And this is going to be another vector 3 because we're transforming it in whichever direction he's facing. So we wanted 0 in the X again, and this time we'll have it at rotation distance in our Y axis and 0 in the Z axis. And our move direction in the Y direction is that gotta set it right, gotta set, because it's going in opposite. Minus equals gravity times time dot delta, and of course our controller we're going to move that in the move direction. And we need that to be multiplied times our time dot delta time. Okay, that's it for our code. Okay, let's see it in work. Code, I probably should have did this first. We have to drag. Well, first let's see if it works. So, as you can see, oh, it's not working. Because again, I didn't drag the actual script onto the character control. So here's our script spinal controller, and this will be dragged onto our character. Let's make sure. Let's move this up a little bit. So I want it to be close to our mover script. All right, there's a mover script. Okay, spinal controller is set. It should definitely work now. Okay, we got our guy. We can rotate to the left and to the right. You can see him. What did we learn today? We learned how to create a plane for movement. We learned how to make a character move. We learned how to apply gravity. And finally, we learned how to rotate our character in order to change the direction of movement. So, let me know what you think in the comment section, man. Thanks again for watching another episode of Get On Code. Now get coding, goddammit! That's it.